Our next speaker is a special one. Alhassan Bangura is a senior at Syracuse University, majoring in political science with a concentration in political economy. Born and raised in Hyde Park, Boston, he spent his time at Syracuse University focused on leadership, strategy, and the power of communication. During his time on campus, Al has held a plethora of leadership roles across multiple student organizations, including multiple presidential positions where he has led teams, coordinated initiatives, and played a role in shaping student engagement across campus. His work sits at the intersection of leadership, institutional communication, and diverse experiences, focusing on how ideas, narratives, and strategy influence the ways that organizations operate and connect with people. He's currently spending his final semester in the Maxwell at DC program, where he interns with the governmental affairs team for Syracuse University, gaining firsthand experience on federal policy as well as its specific effect on higher education. His talk explores cultural exhaustion, the quiet weight carried by communities navigating constant pressure to adapt, perform, and persist within systems that continuously demand more. The talk examines how broader forms of cultural fatigue shape how groups move through society and how they show up within institutions and the roles that they occupy within them. Please help me welcome Alhassan and his talk, The Weight We Don't Talk About.
You know, they was talking about what matters next. I was thinking dinner, hungry as hell. Before we get started, I would like to dedicate this TED Talk to my brother, Amani Tambawa Kanu, as he really played a pivotal role in the discussion we'll be having today. Regardless of your race, religion, ethnicity, or creed, I really challenge y'all to look at the lens in which y'all view this world. I'll share with y'all today mine. Now for me, growing up, I went to the same school in the same town since first grade. Same town, same commute, same people. I'm a proud product of MECO, a busing program that took inner city individuals like me from underrepresented, underfunded communities and gave them a chance in this race we call life. And for a long time, at an early age, I was tasked with navigating different environments, different expectations, different perspectives, all at once. I couldn't quite understand how that shaped me until 7th grade, because that was when I first got an understanding of what I now consider as the system. And I won't get into every detail of it, but I will say this: it changed the way I saw everything. From being wrongfully expelled and having to claw my way back just to be bullied and isolated, it made the man I am today. But most importantly, it made me want to be a player in our system. It was the first time I realized that a lot of these systems we talk about, ones we hear about in the news, ones we debate about in our classrooms, they're not abstract. They're real. They affect how you're treated, what's expected of you, how you're seen, and sometimes how you perceive before you can even say a word. And that made me start asking questions. Who built these systems? Who are they made for? Were they made for me? Were they made for you? Were they made for you and me? All questions I started to ask myself. And it made me realize that that was the reason I became a political science student. That was the reason I came to Syracuse University. And as some of you may know, as Sonia had wonderfully mentioned, I made the decision to spend my last semester in Washington, D.C. But a huge chunk of my time was spent here as a liaison between university leadership and the students. All efforts are getting a better understanding of not just how the system works, but how it presents itself in all aspects. Because over time, something has become very clear to me. Power, it doesn't just sit in institutions. It sits in who gets to share the story. Because we like to believe that, the truth speaks for itself and that if something is right, eventually it'll rise to the surface. But that's just not how our world works. Narrative shapes perception. And perception shapes policy. And policy shapes people's lives. So if you control the narrative, you don't just influence how people think. You influence what actually happens. And if you're not part of shaping the narrative, you're a part of consuming when I was built without you in mind. Don't worry, Monica. We're going to go into the kitchen, too. But this time, someone's asking you to make some food with you. But you ain't choose the ingredients. You ain't set the heat on the stove. You don't even know what's already in the pan. You just expected to hop in, throw your apron on, and help make the meal. And eat whatever comes out. That's what it feels like. When people are left out of spaces where their stories are being shaped, because the people in that kitchen, they're not just chefs. They're deciding what goes into the meal, what gets left out of the meal, and how it's presented all together. They're politicians, communicators, institutions, media. They decide what gets told, what gets ignored. So in the final product, it feels iffy, it feels off, it feels wrong. That's not a mistake. That's the result of a process where the people making the meal, the people eating it, they were never truly a part of making it. And for me, coming from where I come from, I started to realize something consistent, a feeling I've been trying to define my whole life. Every time, in every situation, it wasn't just about having smart people in the room. It was about whose perspective was centered. And as an African student navigating these different environments, I personally felt that. Because sometimes it was loud, other times it was subtle, but most of the time, it was silent. It's on what gets left out. And over time, you realize it's not always intentional, but when the people that are not a part of the story engage with the storytellers, the narrative starts to stretch like a rubber band. And the further you get away from culture, the further you get away from lived experiences, the more it stretches, the more the tension builds, until eventually it snaps. And when it snaps, you get distrust, misrepresentation, policies that might not land the way they were intended to, because the story was never fully grounded to begin with. Some of you may have heard America referenced as a quote-unquote melting pot. Different cultures, different identities, all coming together. But a melting pot only works if what's inside of it's understood. Otherwise, it's not a melting pot. It's just mush, confusion. What good does being different mean if being different doesn't make a difference? And that realization, It changed how I see communications. It changed from something that I was just interested in, an industry I wanted to become involved with, and it became something that I felt responsible for. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's not enough to just be in a room. It's not enough to say you have a seat at the table. Being present doesn't mean you're shaping anything. And if you're not shaping what's being said, someone else is doing it for you. I hope y'all listening. Once I understood that, I started to think differently about what it means to try to change systems. Because we talk about change like it's linear. Like if you push hard enough, if you try, eventually something's going to give. But that hasn't really been my experience. And quite frankly, I don't think it's any of y'all's experience either. Because a lot of the times, it feels like you're pushing against something that refuses to move. And that's what brought me to my analogy. Another Greek story. I wasn't going to come up here talking about Hercules, strong. Come on. Sisyphus. He was condemned to spend eternity pushing a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll all the way right down as soon as he got close to the top. Over and over and over again. No finish line. No real reward. Just effort that feels like the second you make progress, as soon as you start moving forward, it changes. And if we're being real with ourselves, that's not just a metaphor. That's what a lot of people experience every day. Because for some, it's not just pushing against systems, it's constantly having to explain yourself to correct narratives that never quite got it right the first time. And doing that over and over and over again. And that's where your fatigue comes in. Not just physical, but cultural. The kind that builds when you feel like you're always pushing, but the system resets before anything really sticks. And over time, that fatigue doesn't just slow you down, it changes how you engage. Some people step back, not because they don't care, but because they're tired. And here's the part we don't talk about enough. That boulder doesn't feel the same for everyone. For some, it's lighter, not because they're stronger, but because part of the system was made with them in mind. Their path might be smoother. Their resistance may be lower. Their voice more easily understood, more openly accepted. But for others, that same boulder may feel heavier because every step comes with friction, every push with resistance. And sometimes, it's not even about pushing the boulder. It's about trying not to get crushed by it. For some people, progress looks like consistent, steady movement uphill, but for others, progress looks like fighting just to stay in place. Just to be heard, understood. And when you really look at it like that, you start to realize that the problem isn't that the boulder exists. The problem is that the weight isn't shared equally. And too often, the same people are expected to carry more of it. So if the answer is just keep pushing, then we're ignoring the imbalance. We're normalizing the weight. And changing that starts with what we choose to do next. It starts with access. Who are you bringing into the room? Who are you making space for? Not just to be present, but to be heard. It continues with accountability. What narratives are you accepting without question? What stories you letting slide, even when you know they're incomplete? And most importantly, it requires ownership. Are you telling your story? Are you telling your story? Or are you letting someone else define it for you? Because every time you challenge a narrative, you lighten it. Every time you bring someone else into the conversation, you lighten it. Every time you speak up, say it with me, y'all, you lighten it. But at the same time, every time you stay silent, every time you accept a story that you know is incomplete, you add weight. So yeah, system is heavy, the boulder is real, but the real question isn't whether the boulder exists. The real question is, what are you doing to make the boulder lighter? Thanks, Mom.